2 weeks left, halfway through, and we're keeping it going with the 31st season in 2007, and that was Juken Sentai Gekiranger. That's supposed to be Fukame Go Gekibite, its morphing sequence. So like I mentioned in Die Ranger, something that was weird to me was Ryo, he had there was like a father arc where it was like, oh, it turns out his father left because he was associated with the villain group, and then it was only there for 2 episodes, and then that was it. With this one, I kind of saw it as a better interpretation of it, because John, who is Geki Red, has a somewhat similar arc in that sense, or has a somewhat similar situation in that I think it's kind of hinted in the beginning and a little bit throughout, but you kind of really mostly first start to notice it when like that arc really happens, and it's spanned about 8 episodes, so at least there's a little bit more development, even if I'm messing up the fact that whether or not they're set up to that moment. For me, that was just kind of another example of, over time, writing got better, and, writing got tighter, and, pacing got better, and things like that. The actor who portrayed Dan, or John's father, before he became a monster, was Kenji Oba, and he's had multiple roles in Super Sentai. He was in Digimon, he was in Battle Fever J, and in another tokusatsu franchise, he was also in Uchukeiji Gaman, which would have a revival in about 4 or 5 years from this time. So Ryo, who is the main villain for the majority of the time, for he kind of switches sides towards the end. I really liked his arc, and I really liked it because it actually reminded me a lot of Mikoto Nagadai's arc from Upper Ranger, and it's actually pretty similar because, long story short, admittedly I don't really get that same like heart-wrenching tragic feeling that I had for Mikoto, but spoiler alert, his death still hurt, but it didn't really have quite the same effect that Mikoto Nagadai's death had for me. And I think that's okay. It's not that it's better, it's not that it's worse, it was just different. And I think the way Mikoto died and how he died, and his last words and last moments fit the theme of Upper Ranger and its theme of Dino Gods a lot better. But for the sake of this, it concluded this person's arc like just fine, and to say at least it was entertaining. I mean, not his death, but the overall arc and seeing him grow and stuff like that. As a side note, and even though the relationship was kind of one-sided, Melee, who is the chameleon and kind of Ryo's female assistant and right-hand woman, really had a thing for Ryo, and I was rooting for her. I was hoping they would get together at the end, which sadly they don't, because, well, they both die. Well, I guess they kind of do if you think about it. And, even though he treats her coldly, it didn't feel like it was, abuse. It didn't feel like manipulation. He was always just someone who didn't really know how to communicate with people. So, and, she was doing her best to try to, break his cold heart, and I think she kind of does it towards the end, because he actually is affected by her death and things like that. But, even though it was mostly one-sided for the majority of the season, I ship it. It's cute. It's definitely different from the other crush relationships you see, because this one is a little bit more of a, superior to subordinate relationship, as well as it being heavily one-sided, whereas the ones I noted before, like Akashi and Sakura from Gekiranger, was like really subtle Gekiranger, and they're like a duo for the team, and things like that. But it was different. It was nice. So something I kind of forget about these two is I kind of forget that they're technically considered extra rangers, and I guess they technically qualify as rangers because in Gekiranger, the Gekiringers have the ability to turn into any ranger before, or any ranger really, and they have the ability to turn into Rio and Melee, and they typically do them when they're all extra rangers. So I guess they technically do qualify as extra rangers. They do have mechas that combine with the main teams, and their suits are somewhat Sentai-like. I mean, they have like a visored helmet, but a lot of ornaments and padding and armor. I guess that kind of made it look not as Sentai-like, so that's probably why I sometimes forget that they're technically considered extra rangers. Another thing that I liked about this season was Fukami Go, or Geki Violet, and his Shigeki, but I will get into that when I talk about my favorite episode, because it has to do with him. I'm not really sure why this one threw me off, but because I mentioned that the appearance of Tage Kruger in Gekiranger didn't bother me, but for some reason the animal forms in Gekiranger threw me off. And I'm trying to think about it now, but maybe it's because they couldn't change into their human forms. They actually explain it, because I think in a previous battle, like long ago, when everyone was feuding, because they actually talked about like two different forces, combating each other, actually kind of like Dairanger, which I forgot to mention is also Chinese themed. This one that kind of leans more towards the martial arts aspect, but anyway, I forgot what the reason why they had to give up their human form, and like it made them stuck in their beast animal form, but they explain it, which is fine. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm probably thrown off because in Power Ranger Jungle Fury, all the masters, they had animal forms, but they were able to go back to their human forms whenever. I did think that when Power Rangers Jungle Fury, they had ranger versions of some of their masters. That was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool. Like, well, they're technically called Spirit Rangers, and they didn't morph into them, they just summoned them. But that was kind of cool, as opposed to using that part of the budget to develop like a typical battleizer. They did something like made their own rangers. I thought that was cool. And back to Gekiranger, something that they did do was they actually named the masters after famous kung fu stars, and some of them are pretty obvious. Some of them I didn't know. Like, I'm not like a huge kung fu martial arts movie fan, but some of these actors are pretty well known enough where you don't necessarily have to see some of those kung fu movies to know who they are. For instance, they had a master who was Bat Lee, who's supposed to be Chet Lee. They had a Master Sharky Chan, who is Jackie Chan. Master Gori Yen, who's supposed to be Donnie Yen. Master Michelle Peng, who is supposed to be Michelle Yeoh, and the ones I didn't really pick up on were Master Pyun Biao, who's supposed to be Yuen Biao, and Ella Hung Kampo, who's supposed to be Sammo Hung. So, maybe they're more well known if I actually watched kung fu movies and stuff. But that was a nice tribute because of how centered around martial arts and kung fu and a little bit of Chinese culture that this season was rooted in. Speaking of Chinese culture, so I mentioned in my Gekiranger video that there was another season where they did the Drunken Fist, and this is that season. And it's not because, and even though this is largely Chinese and martial arts centered, it's not because someone had a problem. It's because there was a situation where I think they were trying to catch some thieves who stole something personal from one of the masters, and they pursued them, but then they change out their disguises and they're trying to seduce them or fool them so that they can escape, and they end up in a Chinese restaurant, and then Retsu, who is Keki Blue, I forget the reason why he has to take up Drunken Fist, but he does. It's just something I noticed. It was just interesting. Although, from what I remember, this one did not have the warning on the screen the same way that Gekiranger did. Oh, I forgot to mention this for the talking about the masters. I felt like they were able to make them a little bit more involved in the Rangers' lives. Sometimes they were just there, and they weren't necessarily there to, impart more wisdom or to, ask them for help on something, or they're the ones who got in trouble. But, they were just kind of there, just kind of like more characters for them to interact with. And there's something about the Master's animal forms, now that I'm thinking about it, they didn't feel like a typical old master. Like they had, a little bit more, I guess I can say personality. Like they all had lives outside of being masters, at least from what I can remember. Like for instance, Goru Yen is a novelist. Michelle Peng is like head of the Swedish branch of Scratch, which is the company of that all the Gekirangers are under. So maybe that's why Master's animal forms kind of threw me off, because they didn't really depict the usual master. They don't really depict the usual old master with a long beard and like talking slow, imparting wisdom. Hardly ever fights. They just like it felt like the age gap between the Rangers and the Masters was not super far off. Well, except for Master Shafu, but everyone else was pretty much still close. Like they were still able to get along with them and be friendly, whereas I felt like the ones in Power Rangers Jungle Fury, it was like the typical master-student relationship. Yeah, that's why. Or something that I found interesting was the setting for the Gekirangers. So, and what I mean by that is usually the setting or premise of the Super Sentai is either rooted in some ancient power, or it's like a military function, or an elite organization, or sometimes a secret organization. Whereas with Gekiranger, it's somewhat rooted in old ancient power, and it mixes it with like a modern day company, because the company that makes all of their gear is called Scratch, and they make like performance gear. Actually, like, and some of it is like, martial arts performance gear. And thinking about it now, it actually kind of goes with the theme because it's related to martial arts, like, high tech sports equipment for martial arts. And thinking about it now, it's actually pretty fitting. But it was just something that you didn't normally really see. It was just like a product company, and then they're using their gadgets for their own thing. Think about it, it's kind of like how Bruce Wayne, Batman, uses Wayne Enterprises to make a bunch of gear and equipment that can be used for the public, but he's really doing it for himself to use as Batman. And I rambled on for quite a bit, but on to my favorite episode, or lesson, and that was lesson 25, Hine Hine, Shigeki is mine alone. And this is the episode where Fukami Go, Gekiviolet, officially joins the team. And this is the first time that he morphs, the first time that he calls his mech, because I think he was introduced like 2 episodes ago, and technically until he shows up, he was actually presumed dead or missing. And the reason why it's such a big deal that he finally morphs, puts the suit on, and fights is because he has struggled a lot with his power, because his power is kind of an altered version of the power that the main rangers have. So he kind of thought his was corrupted, and he did not feel like he had the sense of peace and justice that everyone else had. In this episode, he eventually comes to realize that he can make his power his own, and it's up to him to do what he can with his power. My favorite scene in this is his morphing sequence, and before I even watched Gekiranger, I came across this particular morphing sequence, and I thought it was really cool because he has a really cool theme that plays as he's fighting, and the theme that's used when he morphs was really cool, and what he says, and with the conviction and the feeling that he says it in the course of a minute, really lends it to taking ownership and showing conviction. And it was actually, for me, it was the inspiration for an art piece that I did for a friend's gala, and it's right over there. So I didn't draw it. I actually commissioned a friend to help me bring it to life. So even before I watched Gekiranger, I came across his very first henshin scene, and it was only a minute. It had a little bit of talking before the actual scene, and how he was able to depict his conviction and newfound will to fight was really inspiring, and it actually inspired that little art piece over there. I commissioned a friend to help me draw it and bring kind of my little vision for life, and it was an art piece for a friend's gala for mental health, and I was asking about making an art piece that like helps you demonstrate taking extreme ownership of your life and your decisions and things like that, and how this season plays on martial arts, like the main 3 are centered around like a kung fu style. Gekiviolet is centered around a Muay Thai style, and Geki Chopper is supposed to be a karate style, or let's just say that seeing Gekiviolet fight, and some of the people I follow on Instagram are into Muay Thai. It kind of made me want to try to look into Muay Thai a little bit, but with these knees in my body, it's gonna hurt. So I got a lot to work on first. Keki Violet's theme is really cool because it kind of starts out with a little bit of typical Chinese instruments, but then it just goes into like a high tempo, like, jazz fest. It was a lot of fun to listen to. The music worked with what Wakami was saying, and that, he's not gonna run away anymore. He's gonna use his power to, fight, because he was afraid of it before. And it all just worked really well in terms of depicting like the feeling of conviction and taking ownership, and I guess even going deeper, trying to live your life the way that you want to.